The door to Gaines and Weller Law creaked open with the weight of memory. I stepped inside, clutching my son's hand, the sound of our footsteps swallowed by the heavy silence of old wood and older judgment. Savannah's winter air still clung to our coats, but inside, the chill came from somewhere far deeper. Across the polished mahogany floors and under the glow of antique brass sconces, I spotted them, my sister Lana, Uncle Dean, 2 cousins I hadn't seen since my mother's funeral, and a few family friends who had long forgotten how to even pronounce my name. No one stood. No one smiled. Just eyes. Cold. Measuring. Dismissing. She'll get nothing. Dad hated her. The words sliced through the room like a serrated knife. Lana hadn't even waited for the lawyer to sit down. She said it with a smirk, her voice high and clear, as if it were a toast at a celebration. Her husband, Henry, chuckled beneath his breath. Uncle Dean didn't even try to hide the smirk on his leathery face. I didn't respond. I just squeezed Noah's hand tighter. His small fingers responded instantly, curling back around mine. He was only 10, but in that moment he was the only solid thing I had left in the world. Lana looked flawless as always. Platinum hair pulled into a tight bun, navy pantsuit tailored like armor, lips painted in her signature shade of vindictive red. She sat at the center of the table, like a queen presiding over a court that had already passed judgment. To her left, Uncle Dean leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head, eyes lazy but sharp. His presence reeked of authority that he never truly earned, only inherited by proximity. Noah tugged on my sleeve, slightly. "Mom," he whispered, "why are they all staring like that?" "Because they think we don't belong," I whispered back, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "But we do. Still." Even I didn't fully believe it. We moved to the far end of the long table, away from the others, the only 2 chairs left unoccupied, as if someone had already decided where the outsiders should sit. I helped Noah into his seat. His legs dangled above the floor, swinging slowly. He folded his hands in his lap like he was at church. Or on trial. The smell in the room was a mix of lemon polish, old money, and something bitter, perfume maybe, or pride, or decay. It settled in the back of my throat as I lowered myself into the creaking leather seat. Lana turned her head and locked eyes with me. She smiled, not warmly, not kindly, but with that pity-laced poison she'd mastered over the years. "You know this is pointless, right?" she said, voice silky practiced. "Dad rewrote the will, cut you out completely, said you were dead to him." Her words didn't land like a surprise. No, they fell like the confirmation of a fear I'd nurtured for 8 years. I didn't flinch, didn't speak, just nodded slightly as if to say, "I know," but inside, I was trying to remember how to breathe. The room had already buried my father 2 weeks ago. Today it felt like they were burying me. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this room, not in this building, not anywhere near the people who had spent the last decade pretending I didn't exist. But the envelope had come 3 days after the funeral. Handwritten, no return address, just the time, date, and the name of the law firm. No explanation, no condolences, not even my name. I'd stared at it on the kitchen counter for hours, unsure whether it was an accident or a final jab from the grave. But it wasn't me who made the decision to come. It was Noah. We were sitting on the couch, him quietly sketching dragons in the corner of a notebook, when he asked, "What if Grandpa left you something?" I laughed, bitter and automatic. Like what? A list of people to avoid. But he looked up at me with those wide, steady eyes that didn't belong on a 10-year-old, and said, "Maybe there's something you need to hear." That was Noah. Always watching, always understanding things no one had taught him yet. I didn't know how he saw through the layers people spent years building. But he did, so I said yes. I dug out the black dress I hadn't worn since my mother's funeral, ironed it in silence, and helped Noah button up the little collared shirt he'd picked out himself. As I braided his hair, my hands trembled so badly I had to start over twice. He didn't ask why. He just said, "You look beautiful, Mom." And somehow, that was enough to make me walk through that door today. 8 years. That's how long it had been since I last stood in a room with any of them. Since I had packed 2 suitcases, a diaper bag, and walked out of my father's house with Noah on my hip and my name dragged through the dirt. They never asked why. They didn't ask why I left a husband who punched holes in the walls. They didn't ask what it felt like to hold a screaming toddler in a locked bathroom while your husband pounded on the door. They didn't ask what it cost to walk away from a life that looked perfect on paper just to protect something no one else could see. Instead, they labeled me a quitter, a disgrace, a daughter who couldn't handle real life, the girl who abandoned her family. My father, Franklin Moore, didn't speak to me for 5 years after I left. Not a single call, not a single text. And when I brought Noah to his porch one autumn evening, hoping maybe time had softened something, he opened the door, looked at me like a stranger, and shut it without saying a word. Uncle Dean didn't help. He always parroted my father's old-world code. Family doesn't quit. Blood is loyalty. He said it at every reunion, every holiday, every Sunday dinner. And Lana, oh, she took those words and turned them into gospel, into performance. She was the one who stayed, the one who cooked for Dad, cleaned for him, took pictures holding his hand at the hospital and posted them with captions like, "Cherish every moment." She wasn't trying to help him. She was building her legacy. And I was the ghost they never spoke of. So I built something else. Quiet, small, real. A home with just me and Noah. A life with less money but more love. I didn't have time for revenge or explanations or even grief. Just 100 tiny victories. Learning to change my own oil, packing school lunches with smiley faces, laughing at cartoons with Noah on Saturday mornings. But a part of me, the smallest, most foolish part, still hoped that in the end my father had remembered me, that somewhere beneath the silence, the anger, the shame, there was still a trace of the man who once carried me on his shoulders through the oak-lined streets of Savannah. A father who had loved me once. And maybe that's why I came today. Not for money, not for fairness, just for proof that I hadn't been erased. The room settled into an expectant hush as the door opened again and Mr. Gaines entered, gray suit pressed sharp as ever, his briefcase clutched like a weapon. He had always reminded me of an aging falcon, precise, unreadable, with a gaze that never softened. Even now, with my father gone, Mr. Gaines moved with the kind of careful authority that said this was routine. Just another will, just another fractured family. He gave a short nod, then took his seat at the head of the table, directly across from Lana. "Thank you all for coming," he said, voice low but clear. "As executor of Mr. Franklin Moore's estate, I'm here to read the terms of his final will, updated 6 months ago and signed in the presence of 2 witnesses." Lana straightened her spine. Uncle Dean leaned forward, elbows on the table. I stayed where I was, at the far end, invisible by design. The reading began with the usual formalities. Name, date, declarations of mental clarity. I barely heard them. My mind buzzed with white noise. My eyes were fixed on a scratch in the polished wood near my elbow, spiraling like a maze with no exit. Then came the bequests. To my daughter Lana Whitmore, I leave the primary residence at 812 Gardenia Street and all its contents. Lana didn't flinch. Her expression didn't change. But I saw the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes, like a spark behind frosted glass. Henry squeezed her knee under the table. To my brother, Dean Moore, I leave full ownership of Moore and Moore Holdings, along with all assets held under that entity. Dean nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting nothing less. To my grandson Tyler, I leave the collection of vintage watches and antique firearms. Tyler, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a decade, grinned, and leaned back like he'd just hit the jackpot. The list went on. Jewelry, art, a summer cottage in Hilton Head. Every name read aloud sounded like a nail in my coffin. And then finally it came. And as previously declared, Mr. Gaines said, his tone dropping just slightly, my daughter Evelyn Moore shall receive no portion of this estate. Silence. Total. Like the world held its breath, just to watch me crack. I didn't blink. I didn't move. But my body, it screamed. My spine tensed, my stomach clenched. My jaw tightened until pain bloomed beneath my ears. Across the table, Lana let out the faintest breath, like someone suppressing a laugh. Dean shook his head and muttered something about loyalty. Noah's small hand slid into mine under the table. I hadn't realized I'd curled my fingers into fists. His touch was warm, solid, my anchor, but even that couldn't stop the sting. I had come here with no expectations, but hearing it out loud, seeing the finality of it, was a wound I hadn't prepared for. I stared down at the grain of the wood again. The patterns blurred, twisted. All I could think was, why did I come? What did I think I'd find here? The lawyer continued, voice now just a distant hum as he moved on to minor assets and disclaimers. No one looked at me. No one needed to. My erasure had been written, notarized, sealed in ink. Lana leaned slightly toward Henry and whispered something I couldn't hear. He smirked. Dean chuckled under his breath. And I sat there, a living ghost in a room of vultures. Until Noah let go of my hand, straightened in his seat, and calmly, clearly said, You forgot the video. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd imagined it. The room was mid-shuffle. Papers rustling, chairs creaking, Lana reaching for her designer tote, already preparing to celebrate her inheritance over wine and smirks. And then, those 7 words. You forgot the video Grandpa gave you. Noah's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It landed with a weight that silenced every movement in the room. Lana froze, her hand still midair over her bag. Dean tilted his head like he hadn't heard correctly. Even Mr. Gaines looked up, blinking behind his glasses. I turned to Noah slowly, confused, my brain still reeling from the line about me receiving nothing. What video? I whispered, barely above breath. But Noah wasn't looking at me. He was looking straight ahead, his posture perfect, his eyes locked on Mr. Gaines with a quiet determination that didn't belong to a child. From his small backpack, he pulled out a white envelope. It was slightly crumpled, worn at the corners, but clearly marked in bold, unmistakable handwriting, for Mr. Gaines, only if things turn ugly. My breath caught. The handwriting was my father's. I would have recognized those blocky capital letters anywhere. My heart began to hammer, so loudly I was sure the entire table could hear it. Noah held the envelope out across the table with both hands, steady as stone. I was supposed to give it to you if people were mean to my mom, he said plainly, like he was reciting instructions for a school project. Mr. Gaines took the envelope carefully, his face suddenly unreadable. The room leaned in, figuratively and literally. Lana was squinting now, clearly trying to make sense of the words on the front. Dean shifted in his chair, suddenly less smug. When did he give you this? I managed, my voice cracking. Noah glanced at me. The day we visited Grandpa. Just me and him. You were at work. He told me it was important. Told me to keep it safe. I blinked hard, trying to summon the memory. I remembered that day. Noah had begged to go with our neighbor to drop off soup at my father's house. I hadn't thought much of it. I didn't even know they'd spoken. Now I understood why he'd been quiet the whole drive home. Why he'd clutched his backpack to his chest like it held something sacred. Mr. Gaines cleared his throat. I recognized the handwriting and the phrasing. He pulled out the contents. A small USB drive and a folded sheet of paper. For a moment, he just stared at them. Then, slowly, he read the note to himself. His brow furrowed, his lips pressed together. A flicker of emotion, surprise, maybe even guilt, passed through his usually impassive face. He looked up, eyes scanning the room before landing on me. "There is a video message," he said carefully, "from Franklin Moore, recorded prior to the final draft of the will, but submitted with instructions to be played only if." Things became contentious. Lana snorted. "This is ridiculous. He didn't tell me anything about a video." Dean leaned forward, voice harsher now. "We don't know what's even on that thing. Could be fake." "Mister." Gaines held up a hand. "It's time-stamped, authenticated. I witnessed the signature. And per Mr. Moore's written request. I am legally obligated to play it." He rose, walked to the side table, and retrieved a slim black laptop from his briefcase. The air in the room shifted, thickened. I could feel the tension like static before a storm. He inserted the USB. The screen blinked to life. A black screen. One word appeared, play. Noah didn't look nervous. He just sat back, eyes forward, waiting. I, on the other hand, was trembling. My fingers dug into the arms of the chair. My chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. What was on that video? Why now? What had my father left behind? "Mr." Gaines pressed the spacebar. And the screen went black. Then Franklin Moore appeared. The screen flickered, then steadied. And there he was, Franklin Moore, thinner than I remembered, paler. His once imposing shoulders had softened under a navy blue sweater, the one I'd given him for his 68th birthday, the last gift I ever sent. I hadn't known if he'd even opened the box. But here he was, wearing it. That alone knocked the breath out of me. He sat at his old desk, the same worn oak with the brass corners. Behind him, the antique globe we used to spin as kids still sat in its corner, unchanged, like a relic from a better version of this family. He folded his hands in front of him. Then, with a quiet breath, he looked straight into the camera. "Hi, Evelyn." The words hit like a wave. I gripped the arms of my chair so hard I thought they might splinter. No one moved. No one dared. He looked tired, but not cold. Not angry. Just human. "If you're watching this," he continued, "I'm gone. And I'm guessing things didn't go well." His fingers twitched slightly, a nervous habit I'd inherited. "I never thought there'd be peace between you and the rest of the family. I know what they think of you. Hell, I know what I said about you." He paused, eyes cast downward. When he looked back up, something had shifted. His voice was lower, slower. He wasn't reading from anything. These were his own words. I was wrong. 3 words I had never thought I'd hear in my life. "I believed Lana," he said. "I believed Dean. I believed what they told me you were, that you ran, that you didn't care, that you left us." He swallowed. His throat worked hard, like the truth was a stone lodged deep. "But I didn't ask you, did I? I didn't listen. You knocked on my door once. And I shut it. I shut the door on my own daughter. And my grandson." The room was still as death. Even Lana wasn't breathing. I thought strength meant pride, that walking away was weakness. But I was wrong about that too. Strength, he looked straight into the camera. Strength is showing up. It's protecting your child. And you did that, Evelyn. You did what I couldn't. Tears blurred my vision. My hand rose to cover my mouth, but the sob that escaped was silent. Noah, beside me, didn't look surprised. He only looked calm, like he'd been waiting for this. "I met Noah," my father continued, his voice cracking. "He came by one day with soup. You were at work. We sat on the porch. He didn't say much, but when I asked him about you, he said, 'My mom is the safest place in the world.' That did it. My heart shattered into something too soft to hold. I turned to Noah, but he didn't meet my gaze. He just kept watching. 'I lost you,' my father whispered. 'I see that now. I lost my daughter because I thought being right mattered more than being kind.'" He paused again, then straightened slightly. I won't let my last act be pushing you away again. He reached for a piece of paper, held it up to the camera briefly. Something signed, stamped. I changed the will. There was a sharp intake of breath somewhere in the room. Lana shifted violently in her seat. Dean's knuckles went white on the arms of his chair. I've left the house to you and Noah, the retirement fund, the savings account, a college trust. It's all yours. He looked like he wanted to say more. And then he did. I know this doesn't fix everything, but I want you to have peace. The peace I couldn't give you when I was alive. My tears were falling now freely. I wasn't even trying to stop them. If they're angry, he said, voice quiet, let them be angry. You earned this. You survived all of it. And you never stopped being a mother. That's more than I ever managed. He leaned forward, expression fierce and gentle all at once. I'm proud of you, Evelyn. Always was. I just didn't know how to show it. He took one final breath, then added softly, take care of my grandson. Tell him, thank you. The screen faded to black. There was no music, no transition, just silence. Holy, irreversible silence. No one moved. No one even blinked. The only sound in the room was the faint whirring of Mr. Gaines' laptop fan and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it presses down on everyone inside like a second atmosphere. I sat frozen, hand over my mouth, tears cooling on my cheeks, and my father's voice still echoing through the hollow spaces he'd left behind. You earned this. I'm proud of you. Tell him, thank you. Noah slipped his hand back into mine. Warm, solid, steady. My anchor once again. Across the table, Lana stood up so abruptly that her chair screeched across the wood floor like a scream. She grabbed her handbag with a hand that shook slightly and muttered, "This is a joke!" But her voice was too thin, too high, not convincing anyone, not even herself. Henry trailed behind her, red-faced and silent. He didn't look back. Dean stayed seated, jaw locked, eyes glued to the black screen like he could will it to change if he stared hard enough. His fingers drummed once against the table, then stopped. He looked toward Mr. Gaines as if to argue, but the lawyer simply closed the folder in front of him with quiet finality. It's all in writing, he said softly. Witnessed, notarized, filed. Mr. Moore's last recorded directive stands. Dean didn't respond. He just sat back, jaw twitching. Then, with one sharp exhale, he rose and walked out. No godbis. No grand exit. Just gone. The rest of the room followed, like falling dominoes. A few cousins offered small nods on the way out, some out of pity, maybe a few out of respect. Others couldn't even meet my eyes. And then it was just us, me, Noah, Mr. Gaines, and the empty chair where my father's voice still lingered. The lawyer cleared his throat gently. There will be some paperwork, he said, his tone stripped of its usual formality. But everything's in order. The property title, financial transfers, and trust documentation. It's all ready. Just needs your signature. I nodded, but my lips couldn't form words yet. My hands were trembling, too much to hold a pen. Mr. Gaines gave me a small, genuine smile, the kind that people give when they've witnessed something holy. Then he quietly packed up his things and excused himself, leaving me and my son alone in a room that no longer rejected us. The silence that remained wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't the kind of silence that condemns. It was soft, sacred, a silence that held space for something new. A beginning. I looked at Noah, still holding my hand, still looking at me like I was the most unshakable thing in his world. And for the first time in years, I believed it. I had walked into that room, thinking I was forgotten, erased, buried in the shadows of people who had louder voices, better seats, stronger alliances. But I walked out, not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with something far more dangerous to the people who had tried to break me. I walked out with peace. I walked out whole. And they, Lana, Dean, every single person who ever watched me disappear without protest, they had to live with the fact that I was never the weak one. They had to live with the truth. Because my father, after everything, had finally said the words I spent my whole life aching to hear. We didn't leave right away. I don't know why. Maybe it was because my legs still felt unsteady. Maybe I just wasn't ready to step back into a world that didn't know what had just happened. Or maybe I just wanted to sit in that room a little longer. The room where, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a mistake. I loosened my grip on Noah's hand, but he didn't let go. He leaned his head gently against my shoulder, his breath steady, grounding me. And in that moment, all I could think about was how many times I had doubted myself. How many nights I had wondered if leaving had been the right thing. How many birthdays, holidays, family milestones had passed in silence. All because I had chosen safety over approval. And now, with just a few sentences, a man who had spent most of my adult life pushing me away had given me something I didn't even know I still needed. He had seen me. "I'm proud of you." 3 words. That's all. But they unraveled something inside me that I'd kept wound tight for too long. Years of blame, years of silence, years of exile, all of it cracked and gave way to something softer, something that felt like freedom. I glanced at the laptop, still sitting on the side table. The screen had gone dark again, but I could still see his face in my mind, older, smaller, but sincere. I didn't know why he'd changed. I didn't know what made him record that message, or why he gave it to Noah and not to me directly. But maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that, in the end, he'd tried, in the only way he knew how, and that mattered more than any $sign or deed or document ever could. I looked down at Noah, who was now tracing a finger along the stitching in my sleeve. "Thank you," I whispered. He tilted his head up, confused. "For what?" "For being braver than me," I said, my voice thick. He smiled, not smug or proud, just quietly, like someone who'd finished a hard job and didn't need praise for it. "I just wanted you to hear him, Mom," he said simply. "You needed that." He was right. I had needed it. Not the house, not the money, not the college fund. I had needed to be seen, to be heard, to be told that what I did, what I gave up, what I fought for, wasn't invisible. And now, I wasn't. The Evelyn Moore who had walked into that office had been carrying 10 years of silence. The Evelyn who would walk out was no longer afraid of her own story. If you're still listening, maybe you know what it's like to walk into a room and feel like you don't belong. Maybe you've spent years wondering if the people who were supposed to love you ever truly saw you. Maybe you've poured yourself into being a daughter, a mother, a wife, only to be erased by silence, by cold shoulders, by rewritten stories that never asked for your side. And maybe, like me, you've lived with that weight for so long. You forgot what it feels like to breathe without it. I'm here to tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago. You are not invisible, even if they try to erase you, even if they call you a disappointment, a problem, a stranger, even if the rooms you once called home now echo with names that aren't yours. You still matter. Sometimes truth takes time. It hides. It sleeps. It waits for the right moment. But when it arrives, when it finally steps into the light, it's undeniable, it's irreversible, and it doesn't need permission. I didn't walk out of that office with a victory dance. I didn't gloat. I didn't throw anyone's cruelty back in their face. I just held my son's hand, and for the first time in years, I walked with my head high. Not because I won something, but because I no longer believed I was worthless. Because someone had finally said, "I'm proud of you." But more importantly, I had started saying it to myself. So if you're listening to this and your story feels like mine, if your voice has been ignored, your worth questioned, your love rejected, please know this. you are not alone. You are not weak, and you are not done. There's still time for the truth to rise, and when it does, you won't need to explain yourself to anyone. They'll see it in the way you stand, in the way you walk away from their cruelty without flinching, in the way you smile not out of revenge, but out of finally being free. I used to think healing meant getting back what I lost, but now I know. Healing is remembering that I never needed their permission to be whole. I just needed to stop asking for it. So if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of who you are beneath all the silence, please share it with someone else who needs to remember too. Let them hear it. Let them feel it. Because stories like these don't spread by accident. They travel by courage, and by the quiet power of one voice finally saying, I was here, I mattered, and I always did.